Hello, howdy. Welcome to the Lockdown Diaries, my little slice of the internet that I'm currently using as my soapbox. Today I want to talk a little bit more about social distancing and mixed messages and why things aren't working. First of all, we have to jump back in time a little bit for a bit of context. A couple of weeks ago, a police officer was caught on film telling a family that they were not allowed to use their front garden at all. They weren't allowed to play in it, they weren't allowed to go out in there, weren't allowed to sunbathe. This absolutely blew up all over Twitter and was picked up on Facebook and on Reddit's UK poll, and it was also picked up in the press a little bit. Users on social media were quick to point out that this was a bit of an overstep for the police, and I had to agree. As far as I could see, it was a massive overstep for the police, and they were completely out of touch with the guidance. As part of the backlash, the police apologised. They said it was an overstep. They were incredibly apologetic. They reinforced the message that absolutely you could go out in your garden. This was what the government had said. I've come to realise now that this was wrong, and here is why. In the video where the police officer tells the family, don't use your front garden, stay indoors, there's a key sentence that she uses, and that is, the virus does not stop on your fence. Now, one thing to note about most British front gardens is that while the back garden might have a 6-foot fence up, the front garden normally has maybe a little 3-foot high picket fence. If you're lucky, maybe a chain link fence. If you look at this still from the video, you can clearly see the fence is not a big one, and their garden's not particularly wide either. So let's take a look at an example near me. This is why I'm bringing this up now. I've seen an example of this and it's really bothering me. I went out for my government permitted run the other night, and on the way I saw all of my neighbours in one of the blocks of the houses. They were all out in their front gardens, all enjoying their gardens, and at first I thought, cool. But after a couple of minutes that really sunk in and something didn't sit right. So I've gone on Google Maps and I've grabbed the aerial view of the row of houses, and here you go, I've drawn in the gardens. So here's the first of my neighbours out enjoying their front garden, having a good time, enjoying it. I've put a little 2-metre ring around them so you can see for size, that's 2-metre radius, not diameter. And look what happens when the next door neighbours come out into their gardens and they have a nice natter across the fence. The distancing is gone completely. They are, for all intents and purposes, on top of each other, but there's that fence, that garden fence standing between them. That 3-foot picket garden fence. So along comes a delivery driver, and he is completely unaware that he has COVID-19, and he delivers to the house in the middle, for example. Now everyone goes out in their front garden, they don't have any symptoms, it takes up to 2 weeks for the symptoms to show, so they're all out in the front gardens enjoying it. That neighbour is going to spread that to their neighbours on either side, who are going to spread that all around their families. And then while they're in the garden enjoying it, because again, 2 weeks before you realise you've got it, they're going to spread that to their next door neighbours. And again, until the whole block of houses is infected. Now along comes another neighbour from across the street, goes over and has a chat. Their risk of infection isn't from one person now, it's from an entire block of houses. Everyone in that block of houses could infect them. Anyone walking past while everyone's out in their gardens could get infected. As you can see from the map, there's a footpath that runs along the front of those houses, and that's a very well used footpath. So you've now got an entire row infected, potentially other people infected, nobody knows, it takes 2 weeks to know, and everyone goes off to work and spreads it. This is the nightmare scenario that the government has said they don't want. So who's to blame? Well, first I blame the press. And I don't just mean the media in general as a big bad boogeyman, I mean the professional press in the UK. They've all jumped on the bandwagon of saying, no, you can go out in your gardens are fine. But they've completely ignored the nuance of the situation. Secondly, the government. It's literally their job to tell us what's okay and what isn't. And the amount of practical guidance that they've actually issued has been so limited. The guidance has been very vague, very broad, except with a few individual issues that have needed to be addressed. But there hasn't been a broad set of guidance that covers a whole range of issues. Everything is use common sense. Unfortunately, in Britain, not everybody has common sense. Third is people. People who don't fully understand what it is that they're saying will continue to spread that message on social media. They'll post it on Facebook, they'll post it on Twitter. And that misinformation is spreading faster than the virus could. And then it enables the virus to spread. Some of the absolutely idiotic things I've seen so far in the last week is the guy who wore the same set of gloves for the entire day while he was out, scratched his face with them. Someone else wearing a mask who thought that they were basically invincible. Other people spraying Dettol straight on their hands, or bleach. The guidance to say don't do these things hasn't come out. And while yes, I blame the government, I really mostly blame the press. They get to sit in a room with ministers to ask them questions, and they're not asking any questions. They're not saying, people are doing this, what would you say about that? They're not doing their jobs. They're more interested in reactionary clickbait than they are in asking a hard question. Maybe it's a sign of the times. Maybe it's this government and their habit of throwing journalists out of the room if they ask difficult questions. Or maybe it's just that the media don't care. But someone in the government now needs to sit down, get a list of all of the stupid, and put out deliberate guidance to cover each and every case. Because if they don't, when they do ease the restrictions on the lockdown, it's going to be chaos. Looking back at the Spanish flu, when the governments around the world eased their restrictions, there was a second wave. Now, the first wave had killed, I think, about 100,000 people until then. They released restrictions because the rate of infection was going down as far as they could see, and then bam, it was a global pandemic. Millions died. We need to avoid the same mistakes again, and the only way we can do that is with good messaging coming from our government, and someone needs to hold them to account, because at the moment the press are not doing that. It's literally their job to investigate, but they don't care. They just want the clicks. It's also the job of the opposition, but right now the Labour Party is in absolute chaos. There's leaks, there's reports, there's backstabbing, there's calls for expulsion across the board, and there is no cohesive strategy. So really the only people who can fix this is the government and us, people. Write to your MP, say, can you give some guidance on this? I'm going to write a letter to mine. Anyway, stay safe out there.